Welcome to the week 14 patch of the week, Ether Diver Patch a Week Challenge. This week we are pinging filters. So if you're not familiar with this technique, you definitely should be. It's kind of a core synthesis technique, particularly in modular synthesis, but it's not a modular only technique. You can actually do this in pretty much anything, any kind of synthesizer that has a filter, resonant filter that will self-resonate, or even just come close to it. And you can actually ping some filters, I think, that don't self-resonate completely. Maybe not as well. That's neither here nor there, because we are using QPAS, and it is a filter that pings very well. So the idea with pinging a filter is you set it to nearly self-oscillate, cutoff relatively low, resonance relatively high, typically. If it's a low-pass filter, or band-pass filter in this case. And then you send it a little blast of noise or something, a very short signal to excite the filter. Ping it, if you will. And and then it rings out for a second at the frequency of the cutoff. With the tone, corresponding to what it sounds like. It's basically a sine tone, but there's noise in it from the ping, or just irregularities in the filter, and it's a pretty good technique for getting a lot of percussive sounds. You can make some amazing kick drums by pinging filters, as well as some great toms and rim shots. Just doinky percussive sounds, toms, tablas. If you add a little pitch bend to the envelope, a lot of different things you can do. Okay, but let's look at this patch in particular. This is after much agonizing and building and taking apart, probably 8-10 patches maybe. I settled on what's nearly the simplest possible iteration of this patch. Let's go over these inputs and outputs real quick. The ping itself is, what's going into the input there is actually just the envelope output of the O control. I'll show you the O control connections in a second. That left radiate over there is the time channel. What would be the time channel? I've got it attenuated on the O control, so it's not actually controlling the time. This is just a steady clock per step. But that output is that row of knobs, if you will, is going to the left radiate. Okay. The next input there you see is the unattenuated frequency, freak 2, if you will, input for the QPAS, and it's coming from what would be our pitch control, the top row of knobs on the O control, in other words. And then finally, we've got going into resonance. You can see the resonance. If you know anything about pinging filters, you'd be like, wow, that's a really low resonance filter for a filter that you're pinging. There's two things that work here. One is the QPAS has a lot of resonance, and so it gets to what most filters might be, self-resonating, full resonance at like 12 o'clock. So over here at 9, it's still pretty resonant. Not crazy resonant, not resonant enough to ping. But as you can see, also I have the attenuator on that turned up to about half, and I've got something going into there. And what I've got going into there is the strength output of the O control, which is essentially the velocity. So it controls how strong, how high of a gate, how strong the trigger signal is on this very strength envelope that I'm using to ping. And it also controls how resonant it is, which is how long it rings out. So essentially, it's like fully velocity sensitive. Like, it's pretty realistic. Like, the harder you hit it, the louder it is, and the longer it rings. And that's kind of what real materials do. Neat. Sorry about the jittery camera. Don't have any professional gear here. It's all handheld or using books to prop it up. I'm mostly a writer who's doing videos as kind of a convenience. Anyway, let's look at the O control. As I said, we've got the gate controls the ping. Next over there, that's the touch output, that second output. With the gold arrow, and that is going to the right radiate. The next one there is that's the bottom row, the time row. That's the one that goes to the frequency I'm not sorry, not the frequency cutoff, the left radiate, and then what would normally be the pitch row, that goes to the frequency cutoff. So it's sure enough controlling our pitch. Not much to see there, but it's worth showing anyway. And yeah, that's basically it. That's the patch. Now, a lot of times with one of these, I would, I would want to, from the QPAS output, go through a distortion or maybe the flex shaper. Some of the wave shaping tools in this row, for example, another filter, even. But I wanted to keep this simple and just let you hear the sort of straight tones, because the straight tones as they are quite usable. And from there, of course, you can always run them through effects, compress them, run them. I frequently will run them through tape to get tape saturation, compression, distortion on them. Tape sound, I guess I should just shorten that too. Wash them in tape, if you will. I might put on wave folders, even chorusing, flanging, stuff like that. You can go anything, any kind of tone shaping you would do with any other sort of tone, you can absolutely do with pinged filters. Anything that would work on a percussive sound. And they don't even have to be percussive. If you raise that resonance to just below the threshold of, it's tricky to balance, but if you can get it just below the threshold where it's basically sort of vibrating anyway, and then when you hit it, it'll ring out sometimes indefinitely. It'll just go from there, or it'll ring out so long that it's essentially a sustained tone, and then you can turn those into synth tones and things like that. Last night, while I was experimenting with this, I actually had quite a complex patch going at one point that ran it through a whole distortion and another filter and some other stuff, and it ended up being like I got a full-on acid line out of it, which maybe would be one for a topic for a future patch. But there you go. That's pinging in a nutshell, and I hope you enjoy it. We'll go out with another few minutes another few seconds anyway, 40 seconds maybe, of that performance of that we opened with, to get some more from this exact patch, more sounds of this exact patch. And I've made about 3 banks worth of pinged sounds over the last week or two. And I don't know, maybe I could be persuaded to make a sample pack if people told me they wanted to download it, especially if people were willing to kick a few dollars for it, to make the trouble of putting it together worthwhile. I don't know. Maybe if I hit 100 subs, I would put it out. You tell me. Come on, help me out here, folks. That's it for today. We will be back in a week with another patch, and possibly back before then with some performance videos on Strega and whatnot. Thanks. Bye.